Yes, I am Andrew Ledford, and today is another episode. This isn't quite its coffee time. In fact, I think instead it's probably more like the life and times of Andrew Ledford. Yes, indeed. We are at the end of 2023. We are still within what I consider the transition period, going from Christmas Eve to New Year's Eve. This is the traditional time that we go from becoming something new to being something new. So, the first time I became familiar with this 7 day transition was in the story of Gilgamesh and Enkidu. He was the wild man, and it took 7 days, actually 7 evenings, 7 nights, for him to go from becoming the wild man outsider to becoming a civilized part of the city, to become civilized and part of the city and society. And while back then they probably had a much more pragmatic reason for that 7 day transition period, it's a narrative that still serves us well. So, what do we do during this time? We set our aspirations, we set our new goals, as well as looking back on the past year and seeing what we have accomplished. This last year, I have been working on my new book. I wanted to get it finished by 2024. And for the most part, I am. Actually, I am finished, but I don't have it published yet. So I hope to do that quite soon. I thought it was done, 3 days or so ago, but I started looking through it. And this is the bane of a writer. I saw I needed a comma. I saw I needed to change a word. A sentence needed to be taken out. Another sentence needed to be changed. Oh my goodness gracious, it's a regular taskmaster. In fact, I think that's what Winston Churchill said about writing. At first, it's an alluring mistress that draws you to her. But by the end, it's a taskmaster that won't leave you alone. And that is sort of how the book has turned out to be. I do hope to have that last look at it done maybe by this evening, and then we'll see where we go from there. Unfortunately, I've been so busy these last several days, I really haven't had a chance to sit down and plan out a new goal, a new aspiration for the coming year. But I do have a few ideas. Over the last 6 days or so, some ideas have come to me as I've interacted with people in the community and kind of setting a direction, but without some concentrated effort and evaluation, deduction. Not sure if that's the direction I'm going to go. So, writing. Another part of writing is reading. And as always, I have read several books this year. A book I was really looking forward to is this one, Building a Story Brand. I had such high hopes for this book. But you know what? I was a little bit disappointed. It was not what I was hoping it would be. However, another book that I started to read that I didn't think was going to be that influential, and I still don't know why it is this one, Certain to Win. But for some reason, this book has just stuck with me, the information in there, and has been applied, we could say, to many different aspects of my life. And it kind of is interesting because basically it's a decision cycle based off of an orientation response. And that's sort of what we see in dog training, is that there's a decision cycle often based on an intuitive response or way of dealing with things, sometimes more analytical, but all based on your orientation, both physical orientation to the environment as well as your internal orientation as far as your culture and history goes. And then a book I did not read this year, one that I almost always read every single year except this year, so I did think I should mention it, is this Telesales by Stefan Schiffman. Almost always read that book at the end of the year, but this year, no. Instead, what book did I read instead of that one? Here it is. Spin Selling. Another very good book. I wanted to reread that. So, Stefan Schiffman got replaced by Neil Rackham. Neil Rackham, that's the guy's name. And then another book I thought that was quite interesting, although it gave me new ways of looking at an old training technique, is this one, Tiny Habits by B.J. Fogg. Let's see if we can see it there, right there. A lot of what he talks about I've been doing since I was an older teenager, in my early 20s, right around that time. You know where I learned it? Dog training. Yep. All the old-time dog trainers I used to work with, well, not all of them, but a lot of them, actually invented Tiny Habits before Tiny Habits were cool. So didn't quite name it the same way. So I guess I think he's from Stanford. If you're from Stanford and you name these things, you get credit for it. But you'll hear me writing about some of this in my new book. And then my old tried and true favorite that I read every so many years is B.F. Skinner's Verbal Behavior. Let's see if we can see that there. Yep, that's it. It's kind of shiny, isn't it? Right there. Very good book. I got more out of it this time than I ever have when I've read it in the past. And, I bet if I read it again next year, I'd say the very same thing, because the information is rather densely condensed in a dense format. Let me put it that way. A lot of information, not exactly an easy read. But I personally like reading B.F. Skinner, so I find it very interesting and applicable to things that I'm working on now, both writing, speaking, even video. So that is that part of it. The goal setting, that's an interesting thing, because the Certain to Win book has influenced how I think about goals. I still believe we should have goals that we want to accomplish within a year. And this is something I write about as well. And those would be, I consider, finite goals. There's a time you start a process where you go through, accomplishing smaller goals step by step, and you progress till you get to the end goal, which is measurable, basically. You either do it or you don't. And then there are infinite goals that require continuous achievement, and they're never ever done. And I compare this to going through a dog obedience training course, finite goal, or keeping your dog trained, infinite goal. You're training your dog anytime you interact with it, so that you're constantly training. It never ends. Writing's sort of like that too. While this isn't coffee time, I do tend to have a cup of coffee here. Because I have quite a few things I'm working on at the moment. I do have the book. I'm doing this on OBS. I downloaded a fresh install, and I am working at modifying many of the settings. So I'm hoping this turns out well. I've been doing a lot of experimenting with it because I'm going to be using it for something that I usually don't use it for. In fact, I have a project coming up where we'll be using OBS. a video project. And then I also supposedly will have a new show that I'm producing next year. Well, we're talking in the works. We're still talking about it, using Livestream Studio for a real estate company. That I am looking forward to. We will actually have a studio to work with. So doing multicasting with Livestream Studio. So that'll be a fun project. What else? I think that might do it for today. I am starting to do group dog training, starting to do a lot more dog training actually, but also very interested in sales, still interested in sales. I'd like to have a sales job where I can be honest with the customers I deal with. That's probably the most important thing, which is kind of an oxymoron with sales. Usually, sales isn't about being as honest and forthcoming and helpful as I guess I want to be. In dog training, I can do that. I can tell people, this isn't for you. This is for you. This is what I expect. I can be pretty upfront and honest and let people know where they're at. In sales, usually if you're doing sales for somebody else, you basically just have to sell. And that's the most important thing. Doesn't matter if it's 100% accurate or not. At least that's what I found in a lot of sales jobs I've had. But I would like to start doing that again, mainly because I am really starting to explore more nuanced and complex parts of verbal behavior. And some of those require a fairly large number of trials in a somewhat stressful or competitive environment that you would find in sales. So that's the reason for that. Okay, that is going to do it for this little episode of basically my New Year's Eve video. As always, I am wishing you the very best in life. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.